Thank you, everybody.
Just want to make a comment about, here again, I mentioned feedback, as far as the bookstore. One thing we were experimenting with a few weeks was doing the singing bowl during the meditation. The feedback we got, the consensus was that people really didn't like it. Some people loved it, others didn't. So instead, we're going to use it. The secondary feedback I got was that they liked it. The way we used it as a gong, at least before I arrived last year. So we're going to do that, to open and close the meditations. So I appreciate that kind of feedback. I know one woman said, in particular, the residents just, she felt, it just really kind of messed with her chakras or something like that. So at any rate, it's good to know. So virtual group hug. Yeah. Centuries ago, people set out to sailing, not knowing where they were particularly going. We're going to have Duncan put up the slide of the Atlantic Ocean. Especially the Spanish galleons and stuff, as that, of course, the New World had been discovered. Of course, the Native Americans had something to say about that, but what they found was that since they were sailing ships, they had to go with where the winds were. So when they wanted to go from, say, Europe down to southern Africa, they found that the best way to do that, fastest way to do that, is to actually head over towards the American coast and head down, South America, and then they could pick up the winds that would just blow them over to South Africa, rather than trying to follow the coastline. It just didn't work very well. They did discover, though, early sailors found that when they hit the equator in South America, there'd be the chance of doldrums. There'd be no wind. The ship would just kind of be sitting there for days, sometimes weeks at a time. And of course, when you're sailing the ocean, you have to make sure you bring enough water with you back in those days. So they get there and then they start running out of water. What they discovered, though, in the years to come, was that the reason that there was kind of a doldrums there is because they were just off the delta of the Amazon River. And all of this water pouring in from the Amazon and several other rivers that just kind of pour into the ocean there, right at the equator, that 200 miles out, it was fresh water displacing the ocean. So here some of the early sailors were just, desperately dehydrated, and all they had to do was to just throw some buckets over the side and draw up the water. And so future sailors would do that. They'd replenish their water supply at that point. But imagine for a second, being on those ships and having this dehydration and thinking that you're lacking something, when in reality, they had this abundance all around them. As you know, of course, the topic for today is on friendship. And I've noticed in the 21st century, especially in cities, we live in close proximity to people, but do we ever really get to know them? I know when Carla and I moved here in December, one of the neighbors from across the street, as we were moving in, came over to say hi. But we didn't hear from any of the other neighbors, so I found I had to just be proactive. Go out there when I saw somebody outside in the yard or something like that, introduce myself, get to know them, get to know people by name, write it down so that I wouldn't forget. So if someone is feeling lonely, they're in the midst of many other people who'd be willing to be a friend. What I found, though, I was not very good at making friends. I guess you could even argue that I'm still not as good as some people. I learned about introverts and extroverts. Now, when I was a kid, I learned that introverts were people who were shy and extroverts were people who were outgoing, but that's not really true. When you look at these personality tests, especially the Myers-Briggs, introversion and extroversion means that when you're amongst the crowd of people, you end up feeling kind of drained at the end of it. Introverts really just need some good time alone, meditation, prayer, or just some time to relax. And when we did do the personality test in ministerial school, we found that 70% of the students in my class were introverts, rather than extroverts. Now, extroverts, they love crowds and they love to be, they draw energy from being in crowds and stuff like that. And I was thinking of, like when I was in college, there'd be the extroverts who couldn't possibly understand the introverts. It's like, why didn't we want to be out partying all night? It's like, well, it takes its toll on us. So, and add to that, I'm a Scorpio male. So we like to hold our cards very close to the vest and don't let people in. So I really had to make a conscious effort, especially coming out of seminary, that, wow, yeah, I got to be willing to let down the veil, take off the mask, be willing to show people who I truly was. And I didn't do a very good job, our first congregation in Hollywood, Florida. But as time went by, I recognized what was going on. I had to let go of these preconceived notions about what it would mean to reach out to people. Of course, we learned as kids, don't talk to strangers, don't go out in the street. Well, there comes a time, though, that we need to shed that kind of stuff. But the underlying stuff was more just that unworthiness that I was feeling. I never quite felt worthy of the various positions that I had because I knew deep down I was flawed. And it took me a while to realize that, hey, everybody's flawed. There's no reason that I have to be concerned about showing you that I'm not perfect. I may be perfect in spirit, but I certainly ain't perfect in personality. And once I got that, it was much easier, to open my heart to people and to show them that, yeah, I'm willing to be here, being willing to be attentive, be willing to be your friend. We are social beings. In fact, it's been proven now that solitary confinement can drive people mad. It's a form of torture. We do need to interact with other people. Like I said, introverts maybe not as much, but we do need it. It's part of who we are. And consider for a moment that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So, by reaching out to others, we're reaching out to another aspect of God, another spiritual being having a human experience. We almost like open up the communication in this network, this web that we all are a part of. We're all a part of something much bigger than ourselves. Cells in the body of Christ, you'd hear in Catholicism when I grew up Catholic. So we're all part of something bigger than ourselves. Can we be a blessing to each other? So let's take a few minutes to look at three categories of friendship. You've got our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with fellow human beings, and our relationship with God. Now, of course, there's overlap, they're intertwined, but let's just parse them out a little bit. Relationship with ourselves. In the Gospel of Matthew, 5th chapter, starting with the 14th verse, Jesus is talking to a large group of people in class. In fact, this is what's called the Sermon on the Mount, where there are 3 chapters there in the Gospel of Matthew where it just seems to give you a good overview of everything that Jesus taught. Excuse me. So Jesus says, "You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but puts it on a lampstand. It gives light to the entire house." So Jesus was talking to you and me. We are a light. And of course, E.T., the heart light. Yeah, we have that way of just being able to put out love. We eliminate darkness in others by just being, who we're meant to be. Bringing warmth, light to every human relationship. Jesus continues in the Gospel of Matthew, "Let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." And as I've mentioned before, there's the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven. Kingdom of God is this absolute, God never changes, God is always available to you. God, you cannot separate yourself from God because we're part of it. Then the kingdom of heaven that's described in the Bible is that growing awareness that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and our growing awareness and willingness to be able to express spiritual principles in the physical world. Second area of our relationships, our fellow human beings. Now, there's a Bible verse that's often misunderstood. This one's from the Gospel of John. 15th chapter, 12th, starting with the 12th verse. Sorry about that. I got some allergies that are going to get into me today. So Jesus, in this place, is speaking to the disciples. Now, in these middle chapters of John, Jesus is actually speaking as the representative of the God presence that's in all of us. And he says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. When I was a young boy, what I was taught was that meant Jesus was willing to sacrifice his life to save us all. I don't think, though, that's really what's going on here. I think because Jesus is talking to all of us about laying down our life. Maybe it's laying down our concept or our preconceived notions of other people, as I just described. I was concerned that other people were judging me or condemning me. And I was concerned that if someone saw who I truly was, they wouldn't want to be my friend anymore. So can we lay down our life's teachings and be willing to open up to spiritual teachings? And the opposite goes too. Can we lay down our preconceived notion of ourselves? I was feeling unworthy. I was feeling like, I wasn't up to the task. And I was afraid that someone was going to discover it. That's what I think this is all about. And Jesus continues, "You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you. I appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another." So, friendship is a fruit that lasts. Unlike certain produce, like bananas and stuff like that, you can only got so much time for them to express themselves, or for us to eat them before they rot. But friendship, that continues to bloom. That continues to fulfill us. And here again, whatever energy we put out into the world is going to come back to us multiplying. So if we're willing to open our heart in love, we're going to see more love coming back in our lives. There's an interesting story I read years ago about a sociology professor at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. It was 1965, and he came up with a project for his students, and that was to go to this school for troubled boys, grammar school, and interview the kids, get a sense of what they were like, what they were thinking, what their expectations were for the future. And so they were able to profile 200 boys. And then the sociology professor put them away thinking, I want to see what these kids did as adults. So in 1990, that professor had long since passed away, but one of his colleagues there, Johns Hopkins, did pull out this study, and they went to locate these 200 boys. They couldn't find 20 of them, or actually, some of them had passed away, but they just lost complete track of them. So there are 180 left. And here in the original study, the students had a consensus like, we don't think these kids have a chance. And yet, in this 180, 176 of them were universally considered a success. Some of them even became doctors and lawyers. And so as they're interviewing these men in their 30s, well, what was it? What shifted for you? I mean, considering where you came from. And there was this universal note, and that was, they say, well, there's this one teacher that we had in this particular grade. So the professor was leading the new study, checked out. Sure enough, that teacher was still alive, so he went to go interview her. So what did you do? What was your approach? Because my approach was, regardless of these boys' circumstances, I wanted to see the good in them. And my job was to simply love them. That's what made the difference. People genuinely knew that they cared, that she cared. Third area is our relationship with God. As I've said often, faith put in its true place, the only right place to put your faith is in God, as you know God to be. Be willing to trust that everything is going to unfold the way it needs to unfold, that we're going to meet the people we need to meet, that we're seeing God in expression through these other people, but also through ourselves. Let me share a quote from Mother Teresa that I really like. Every day, I minister to Jesus in all his various disguises. Spread love everywhere you go. Children, spouse, neighbor, be the living expression of God's kindness. Kindness in your eyes, your face, your smile, and your greeting. So consider the people we encounter every day. You know, I've always, I've kind of taken on that credo of, no one's a stranger with me. I want to have a conversation with everybody. Wherever I've worked, even before I became a minister, being willing to reach out to even, like, say, the cleaning staff. It's like, hi, how are you? I really appreciate what you do here. I know when I go to the health club, I think it's interesting how the people who are cleaning, everybody seems to ignore them except me. It's like, hi, wow, you're doing a great job there. Thanks. That sort of stuff. So think about those people you encounter, or, maybe someone who sells you coffee or whatever, and be willing to open up a conversation. I'm going to have Duncan put up a slide. So this is your assignment this week if you decide to accept it. Start a conversation. Be willing to open up a conversation with people. and be willing to trust, that things are going to be okay. I recognize that I can always extract myself if this conversation is indeed getting a little weird. And that's, and in this day and age too, I mean, we've got, this political polarization, where an author can come out with a book titled "How to Speak to a Liberal If You Must." That sense that we can't even talk to each other, about our differences of opinions, our differences in what we'd like to see as policy. Number two, be willing to give your total attention. This was really an awakening for me in seminary, that sense of that, so much of my life I'd be talking to somebody, I'd be thinking about what I want to say next, or I'll react to something, I've got a better story than that, rather than just, put all that aside and give someone my full attention. Be willing to say, hi, how are you? Opening my heart and making good eye contact and really listening so that the person knew that I heard what they said. Sometimes even reflecting back, what it is that I heard. And being willing to maybe dig a little deeper. Most of the people come to Unity are intuitive. You can be talking with someone, everything's fine. It's like, dig a little deeper. What's going on? What can I do to help? So, like I said, ask, how can I help? What can I do to help you? A lot of times there's, they can't think of anything. But if I think of something, I'll go ahead and offer it or do it. So if we want a friend, be a friend. So be willing to start up a conversation this week. Really give someone total attention. Once I did it, what an amazing shift it was. And just being willing to give someone my full attention. Am I perfect at it? No. Sometimes, but especially at those times where I'm thinking, I've got to focus, I got to this. Wait a minute here. I'm not giving this person my full attention. And when I do, it makes a big difference. Ask how I can help. And remember, want a friend, be a friend. Remember the first time you came to a Unity church? Or the first time you were in any place new, that uneasiness coming in, deep down your inner child is saying, are these people going to like me? Today we're going to be restarting our potlucks, first Sunday of every month. So be willing to just reach out. In fact, one thing I coach people to do, like the board trustees and main volunteers, is that at the end of service, can you seek out someone you don't know and just say hi? Maybe get to build a new friendship. Our closing story this morning is from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News.
When the lunch bell rings at Boca High in Boca Raton, Florida, 3,400 kids spill into the courtyard and split into their social groups. But not everyone gets included. As we first reported last March, here at Boca High and at schools across the country, someone always sits alone.
It's not a good feeling, like you're by yourself, and that's something I don't want anybody to go through.
Dennis Esteban is a Haitian immigrant. When he came here in first grade, he says he felt isolated, especially at lunch. Now he's popular, but he has not forgotten that first grade feeling.
To me, it's like if we don't try and go make that change, who's going to do it?
So, with some friends, Dennis started a club called We Dine Together.
We dine. Together. We dine. Together. We dine. Together.
Their mission is to go into the courtyard at lunchtime to make sure no one is starving for company.
Dennis.
I'm new here.
You're new here? When did you first come here?
For new kids especially, the club is a godsend.
This is Gabriel.
Gabe, how you doing?
Since it started last
He's
year,
Brazilian.
hundreds of friendships have formed. Some very unlikely.
You're probably meeting kids you never would meet on the football team.
Ever.
Gene Maxmaridou actually quit the football team, gave up all the perks that come with it, just so he could spend more time with this club.
I don't mind not getting a football scholarship. This is what I really want to do.
Just imagine how different your teenage years would have been
What's your name?
if the coolest kids in school all of a sudden decided you mattered.
We get to know each other better.
It obviously takes a lot of empathy to devote your lunch period to this.
Yes.
Either that or first-hand experience.
I went from coming from a school that I always had friends to coming to where I had nobody, so.
Club member Allie Seeley transferred a few years ago. She says with no one to sit next to, lunch can be the most excruciating part of the day.
This seems really unfair. It's honestly an issue. Meeting someone who actually cares and listens to what you have to say really makes a difference. And that could happen at lunch. That could happen at our club.
Since we first told this story, Dennis has graduated from high school, but not from this mission.
Start your own club at your school.
He's now traveling the country, opening We Dine Together chapters at other schools, 15 so far, with more than 100 slated for the new year. And if we're lucky, when he's done showing kids how to make outsiders feel accepted,
Yeah, I'll be around tomorrow if you want to eat lunch together.
he can teach the rest of us. Steve Hartman, on the road, in Boca Raton, Florida.
Teilhard de Chardin was a French Jesuit priest who lived from 1881 to 1955. And here's a quote by him. "The day will come, after harnessing space, the winds, the tides, the gravitation, that we shall harness for God the energies of love. And on that day, for the second time in the history of the world, we shall have discovered fire." May you always be open to God's guidance and grace. Let's prepare for meditation.